right, we've taken a lunch break, and as you can see from the top of your screen on the right-hand side, there's a little red button, orange red button that's indicating we are now recording. So we're back on the record in the case of Mr. Willie Buford versus Associates Building Maintenance, ABM for short. And this is Mr. Buford has already testified, and we are now going to do the direct examination of Miss Natasha Moore. And Miss Moore, if you'll please raise your right hand, which it's hard when you're, okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, so you may now spell your name for the record, please.
Natashamoore.
Okay, so Ms. Moore, you understand that you are required to tell the truth under threat of perjury prosecution, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you are going to have to say yes, no, I don't know. Speak very clearly. One of the reasons we took a break was because we are having problems getting your sound and Mr. Sultan's sound, and we need to have a good record. I am recording this, so we need to have a good recording. Also, both parties have committed to splitting the cost of getting a transcript for this matter, so that means there will be a probably a court reporter who will listen to this and create a transcript, so they need to have your actual verbal statements, which would mean you saying yes, no, I don't know, not and pointing and nodding. Okay, you understand that?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other thing is when people are testifying, it's not at all unusual for you to be nervous, so sometimes you will like tap your fingers on the table or kick the chair legs. Despite the fact that that is what you want to do, I would ask that you not do that so that you don't obscure the record in this way, okay?
Okay.
Now, if you have a problem or you need assistance, please let us know, okay?
Okay.
All right. So then, Mr. Selden, begin to your direct, please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moore. Do you know Willie Buford?
Yes.
Did you work with Willie Buford at ABM?
Yes.
When did you start working at ABM?
I think about 2017, in there somewhere, probably June, July, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact date, but somewhere in there.
And did you work first or second shift?
Second shift.
And did you work at the Capitol Drive location or the North 29th Street location?
For the most part, I worked on Capitol Drive, but toward the end of my employment there, I worked at both locations.
What was the last title that you held at ABM?
I was the second shift supervisor.
Do you recall what Willie Buford's title was during the time that you worked at ABM?
I know he was the first shift supervisor.
Now, Ms. Moore, at some point in time, you made a complaint of sexual harassment, right?
Yes.
Do you recall when that was?
I think it was, I'm not sure the exact date, but sometime in March of 2019, between anywhere from the end of February to somewhere up in March of 2019.
We will stipulate to the date. We'll stipulate to the dates that we've agreed to as to her complaint.
Okay.
So, I can't recall if we stipulated to the date of her complaint, but
I'm looking at, she filed a lawsuit. I don't know if she filed a separate complaint besides the lawsuit. Are you referring to? Are you talking about an informal complaint, or are you talking about the lawsuit?
I'm talking about the first time that she complained. If we could pull up
Okay.
Complaints Exhibit 3.
The stipulation was for the lawsuit in September of 2019.
I think the stipulation, I think the Exhibit 3 does have an actual date time, whatever that date we agreed.
Complainants Exhibit 3 or Respondents Exhibit 3?
Complainants, Exhibit 3, I think.
Respondent?
I think it was on or about March
I'm
3rd.
asking, I'm requesting that the witness be shown complainant's Exhibit 3.
Okay, 1 second, please. All right. Ms. Moore, can you see what I've got in front of you, which is the ERD 032? This is Complainants Exhibit 3. You see that document?
Yes,
Have you seen that before?
yes,
Okay. And does this, without telling us what it says, does this document refresh your recollection about when you made your first complaint about the allegations of sexual harassment in when you worked for you were working assigned at Next Door Foundation but working for ABM?
yes.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Sultan.
When did you first complain about sexual harassment, Ms. Moore?
About during that time, about March, probably 13th, 14th, up in that area. I don't know if it was the day before or that day when we first called, but it was either that day or the day before.
Did you complain to Mr. Buford?
Yes, I didn't complain. I just told him about what was going on. I don't know if that was the complaint, but I did tell him what was going on.
Did you have a subsequent conversation with Mr. Buford and Mr. Smith about your complaint of sexual harassment?
Yes,
And when was that?
it was probably a day or so later. He arranged a meeting with me and Willie and Natasha and Lucretia at his office.
Your Honor,
Lucretia who?
Dixon.
Dixon or Dylan?
Oh, it might have been Dylan. I really don't know, her exact name like that.
And what did you understand Lucretia Dillon's position to be?
She was the person that was over the HR department
For ABM or for Next Door?
for Next Door.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Sultan.
thank you, Your Honor. Could we pull up the complainant's exhibit number 4, please?
You see this, Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Yes. So we're looking at Complainants Exhibit 4, ERD 034 page. And again, this document is not in the record. Don't read it to us, but you can read it to yourself and see if that allows you to answer questions for Mr. Sultan. Go ahead.
The record reflect that Mr. Sultan hasn't actually asked her any questions to refresh her recollection from this exhibit, so I would object.
Right, I assumed he was going to. So go ahead, Mr. Sultan.
Ms. Moore, does complainant's exhibit 4 refresh a recollection as to when you had a meeting with Corey Smith, Natasha King, Lucretia Dillon, Willie Buford about your sexual harassment complaint?
Yes.
And when did you have that meeting?
March 17th.
2020 or 2019?
19.
Thank you.
Ms. Moore, did you continue to have did you have subsequent conversations or meetings about your sexual harassment complaint?
Yes.
When was the next meeting?
The next meeting was at Next Door Foundation with Lucretia and the other young lady who was in HR. I can't think of her name right now.
Was her name Gabrielle Calhoun?
Yes, that's her.
Okay, can we have that name, please?
Gabrielle, Gabrielle, Calhoun, Calhoun.
Sorry, what?
Calhoun.
Houn?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm going to object as that being leading.
I'm going to allow. Go ahead. And Ms. Calhoun was what position, please, with the respondent?
She also worked in the HR department.
Okay. But I do tell you, Mr. Sultan, to be careful. If you want your witness's credibility is at stake, you do not want to be doing too much of the testimony for her, or I will not be able to rely on her testimony. And now you are gone, except I can have a great view of your forehead and hair. Mr. Sultan, I'm not sure what you're doing.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
You moved your camera, so I'm looking at your forehead and your hair.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you. I'm having, I don't
You
know
can't
why.
hear me at all?
No, I can hear you. It's just very, very faint, and I'm not. I think I've solved the issue. Sorry.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right then. So I was saying that you need to be careful of your witness's credibility not to lead. So I'm not going to do anything about that last thing, but if you want your witness to have credibility, you need not to lead them. All right, go ahead.
Ms. Moore, did you have any conversations with Mr. Buford and Mr. Smith about your sexual harassment complaint?
Yes.
And was that before or after the March 17th meeting with Mr. Smith?
After.
Do you remember about when that was?
I don't remember the exact date, but it was shortly after. Yes.
Okay. And who all was in the meeting?
Me, Willie, and Corey, and Timothy
Timothy who?
Baldwin.
And what was discussed in that meeting?
About what was going on with the sexual harassment case.
And what did Mr. Smith tell you?
In that we had that meeting, and in that meeting we were just talking about. I went down to try to file a restraining order, and that didn't work. Matter of fact, Willie was not at this meeting. It was me, Timothy, and Corey.
Okay, and the meeting was about a restraining order?
Yeah.
And well, tell me what happened in the meeting, what was said.
I went to go file. He asked me how was I doing, and
Who's he, please?
what you say?
Who is he? When you say he, you've
Oh, I'm
identified two
sorry.
he's in the meeting. So who's the
I'm
he?
sorry, Corey Smith. He asked me how I was doing. I told him that I had filed a restraining order, and we talked about that I was uncomfortable working alongside with Akalana.
And what did he tell?
Alongside who?
Akalana Abdallah.
Mr. Abdallah? Let's call him
Yeah.
Mr. Abdallah, okay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
And what did Mr.
And
Smith say to you when you said that you were uncomfortable working with Mr. Abdullah?
he said that he was gonna call and talk to someone about me and Abdallah not being able to work with each other. He was gonna call Next Door Foundation, somebody there. I'm not sure who.
Ms. Moore, do you recall filing a lawsuit against Nextdoor Foundation in which you alleged discrimination and retaliation?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when that lawsuit was filed?
A few months after that last meeting.
Your Honor, if we could pull up complainant's exhibit.
Stipulate to the lawsuit being filed and the date.
As part of our stipulation that we made earlier was that this lawsuit was filed in September of 2019. Is that sufficient? That was what the
Yes.
stipulation was.
I understand that. I just need the witness to know the date.
Okay. She's
So if I
agreeing
can
with
lead
us.
witness, I will.
That she's agreeing.
Okay. All right. So Ms. Moore, you filed your lawsuit in September of 2019. You remember that?
Yes.
Did you have any conversations with Mr. Smith about your lawsuit?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about your conversations with Mr. Smith.
Can we have, is there more than one?
What did she say?
Did
Is
you
there
have
more
more than
than
one
one
conversation?
lawsuit? Go ahead.
Did you have more
Okay.
than one conversation with Mr. Smith about your lawsuit?
Well, the first conversation me, Willie, and Corey Smith had at Brownstone, he told me to drop the lawsuit. And he gave me the amount of money that he thought that I owed the attorney to pay him off for whatever I owed him. And also, we talked about Willie's employment at Next Door Foundation and that Willie was not supposed to be working there, and if I didn't drop the lawsuit, that Willie would be fired from Next Door Foundation.
All right, let's unpack that. You had a conversation, you had a meeting with Mr. Smith, Mr. Buford, and yourself at Brownstone on Water Street in Milwaukee,
Yes.
and that conversation occurred after you filed your lawsuit?
Yes.
And in that conversation, Mr. Smith told you to drop your lawsuit,
Yes.
and he also told you that Mr. Buford would be terminated if you did not?
Yes.
Did he tell you anything else?
To pay the lawyer for any lawyer fees that I might have occurred while filing the lawsuit.
And what was your reaction to what Mr. Smith was telling you?
I was kind of flabbergasted, but I was concerned. I'm like, I really didn't want my coworker to be fired because of me filing the lawsuit. So I initially said, okay, I'll drop the lawsuit and go pay the money so Willie can keep his job. And I left.
Do you recall if that meeting with Mr. Smith occurred before or after January 2020?
You said before or after January
Yes.
of 2020?
Yes.
It was before.
Okay. Do you remember when before?
I know it was right after, not too much longer after I filed the lawsuit, but I don't know the exact date.
Your Honor, can we pull up complainant's exhibit number 9?
Okay, 1 second. You said what document?
Complainant's Exhibit number 9.
This affidavit is what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we've got Complainant's Exhibit 9, which again is not in the record, and so do not read from it. ERD 072. Is there a page you want to go to?
Your Honor, before you flip through the pages of this particular exhibit, this exhibit, just for the record, is that of Mr. Buford's, and I don't know what my colleague is proffering to as it relates to asking this particular witness about facts associated with a different testimony.
Again, I'm just going to be asking her whether this refreshes her recollection as to the dates of conversations and meetings. That's all.
I'm going to object to that. This is a sworn statement by a different witness, a witness which has not, at this point, has been sequestered. One of the very reasons for sequestration. If you want to ask her something about dates and times, it should be coming from her recollection, not some other witnesses' statements on this record.
Mr. Sultan?
But with all due respect, it's a frivolous objection. I can use any document to refresh a witness's recollection. There's no prohibition on a sworn statement from another witness.
I agree with that, and at the other hand, I also caution you that by doing what Mr. Baldwin is objecting to, you're really hurting the credibility of your witness, because she can't remember, and she's not remembering based on something of her own. For her to then read this document and say, yeah, I agree with that. That is basically the whole reason for witnesses being sequestered, because she could very easily just go to Mr. Buford and say, they asked me blah, blah, blah date. Do you know when that happened? And then he tells her, and then she's like, yeah, that's the date. That's the date. Whether or not that's really the date, we don't know, because it's not based on her recollection. So I have to agree with Mr. Baldwin. You can do what you're doing, but that basically destroys your ability to say that she's really testifying from her own recollection, her own understanding, because you are providing her with the information that Mr. Buford said.
All right.
So it's up to you.
We can withdraw the exhibit.
All right. Well, where do you want to stop sharing, or do you want to go to a different exhibit?
Yeah,
what do you want to do?
stop sharing the exhibit. That's fine.
All right. Go ahead. Ask questions.
Ms. Moore, after you filed your lawsuit, did you suffer any retaliation?
Yes. When I filed the lawsuit, I was also told that if I didn't drop the lawsuit, he would be fired. But then I just felt like I was being harassed by people at Next Door Foundation multiple times, and then my hours was being shifted around because I had another job and the hours was not working. It was always something with the hours, and then the employees at Next Door Foundation just started being flat out rude.
Did you have any conversations with Mr. Baldwin about your lawsuit?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a
How many
yes?
conversations?
Yes.
How many conversations with Mr. Baldwin did you have?
After the lawsuit, about 2.
Okay. Were these conversations in person, on the phone?
On the phone.
Okay. Did Mr. Baldwin call you, or did you call him?
He called me.
Were either of the telephone were the telephone conversations before or after you filed your lawsuit?
After.
And what did Mr. Baldwin say to you during the first telephone conversation?
We talked about I needed to drop the lawsuit against Next Door Foundation.
Did
And he
Mr.
told me that I needed to drop the lawsuit, basically.
What'd you tell him?
I I was very indecisive because I felt like, you know, my coworker's job was at risk if I did not drop the lawsuit. So I really was stuck between, I know that I should be filing a lawsuit, but at the same time, I did not want my coworker to lose his job because he got kids and a family. So I really didn't know what to do.
Your Honor, I'm going to have to object at this point. Um, Never before, especially in Mrs. Moore's underlining lawsuit, has she ever suggested that I in any way directed her to drop a lawsuit. That's something that I would not do and have not done, and it throws impunity on my professionalism as a lawyer, and makes it more importantly an issue where she has just made me a witness in this proceedings. And
Correct.
I'm sorry.
I agree with you that this is a problem.
And so I don't know that we can continue on this basis without taming the record any further, because this is absurd.
Well,
But
I'm
you
not
did
saying it's
call me.
absurd. This is her testimony, and I am going to allow her testimony. The issue is whether or not you get to continue as the respondent's attorney in this matter because you may be a fact witness.
Well, that decision has to be made now, because I'm going to refute it. Right now, Mr. Smith's rights
Well,
are.
you're not refuting it because, as far as I'm concerned, you're not a witness. You're the respondent's attorney. And in order for you to get testifying, the respondent has to get a different attorney.
That is correct. And what I'm saying is, at this point, I cannot function as his attorney when Ms. Moore just made such a salacious allegation.
What about Ms. Prosser or Ms. Prosser?
Ms. Prosser is a part of my office.
Okay, so, all right. So, Mr. Sultan, where are you going with this? And maybe we should have Ms. Moore kind of step out. So, Ms. Moore, I'm going to remove you to the lobby, and then I'll bring you back in, okay?
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, she's leaving the room. That's better than I'm trying to figure out which one of you is the person there. Okay. Okay, Mr. Sultan? It's left two. All right, Mr. Sultan, you're alone. Miss Moore is gone, correct?
That is correct. She's in a separate conference room.
Okay, so you open a can of worms here. What's the story?
The story is that there was a campaign of retaliation against Ms. Moore for filing her case, and that campaign extended to Mr. Buford.
Okay, no, I want to know, are you gonna, is Miss, are you gonna continue to have Miss Moore testify about conversations with Mr. Baldwin as part of your case?
She only mentioned two conversations. She's testified about one, so I was going to have her testify about the other. Yes.
Okay, and are you saying, right now she testified that she was told to drop her lawsuit? Are you saying that that she would also testify that Mr. Baldwin told her that if she didn't, that Mr. Buford would be terminated?
I don't believe she's going to testify to that.
Okay,
I believe her testimony was that, yeah, I don't think she's going to make that specific.
That's exactly what she testified to, Will. And I'm just that you would even bring
she
this
did
up.
not testify to that, Mr. Baldwin. That's why I'm asking the question.
Did. I am outraged.
It was
Did you
her,
call her or not, Mr. Baldwin?
okay,
I'm
1
sorry?
second. Excuse me,
Call her or not?
excuse me. Stop, right now. Now, she did not testify to that, Mr. Baldwin. She certainly implied that's how she understood the statement that you made to her because of the statement she claims Mr. Smith had previously said to her. So there is that implication, and that's obviously why Mr. Mr. Sultan is putting this in. So I think there's a real question here. Excuse me, I am still talking. So I think at this point, the only fair thing to do is to recess these proceedings while Mr. Smith gets another attorney, because obviously Mr. Baldwin will have to testify. And if he's testifying, he cannot be Mr. Smith's attorney. And if we had known this ahead of time, we wouldn't be having this problem, Mr. Sultan. So, do you have an issue or something about that?
If I may.
Go ahead.
Ms. Prosser is the one who appeared on the case after Ms. Parker appeared on the case. We had a pre-hearing, and Mr. Baldwin was not mentioned as an attorney who was going to be involved in this case at all. And so that's not a fair implication. I haven't had any conversations with Mr. Baldwin about this case at all. Zero. He hasn't had any involvement. And quite frankly, he does have other attorneys in his office. I don't think it excludes the entire firm. And it's not uncommon for lawyers to have communications with witnesses. And every lawyer who does that runs the risk that we're running into right now. And it is the client, not Mr. Baldwin, who gets to make the decision whether the client wants the lawyer to stay on or to get off and testify as a witness. Now, I can appreciate that that conversation has not occurred between Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Smith, and I'm not opposed to recessing the proceedings if that's how Your Honor feels it's best to be handled. But this isn't something caused by me. Mr. Baldwin hadn't appeared on the case until today, and even then he appeared off camera. And the implication was that he wasn't going to do any sort of examination here. So that's not on me.
Okay, well, Ms. Prosser actually started this case by saying that she was going to do an opening statement, which I told her I don't do, and that Mr. Baldwin would be doing the questioning. So that's not accurate. Go ahead, Mr. Baldwin.
I'm trying to control my outrage because Mr. Sultan has been a part of these proceedings in the beginning as it relates to Ms. Moore, has been in communication with my office as it relates to Mr. Buford's case. At no time has Mr. Sultan ever suggested what he has asked his witness on the record. Had he done so, we would have been had ample time to prepare and deal with this matter, including providing my own deposition, my own sworn statements. Mr. Sultan, I shake my head at you.
Okay. I think, Mr. Sultan, you should know that this was an explosive thing to ask. He is the attorney of the respondent. He was the attorney on our file. Ms. Prosser was always saying she was just standing in for Mr. Baldwin. And I didn't know when he was going to show up again, but he never removed himself as the attorney in this matter for the respondent. And I don't know why you weren't talking to him or whatever, but even so, again, there's the point that he is in the same law firm. You know, I'm not going to make these fine legal decisions about what the ethics of this is between whether Mr. Baldwin can have Ms. Prosser be the attorney. I would be okay with it if Mr. Baldwin was okay with it, but otherwise, I'm not going to, this is Mr. Baldwin's license that needs to be protected, and also the reputation of the client, and to get the best representation, and in this situation is untenable and should have been disclosed early on so that we wouldn't have this problem. And I am not willing to continue this with this situation the way it is. I don't know. I think Mr. Baldwin needs a little bit of time to think about this. If I give you like an hour to talk about this with your client, Mr. Baldwin, then we can come back and you can tell us what you're thinking. And then, or do you need less time, more time, whatever? I would prefer to be like an hour or less so that we can just decide what we're doing yet today. So,
Your,
Mr. Baldwin?
Your Honor, I have over 150 pages of transcript associated with Mrs. Moore's testimony. As I said, as it related to the underlining proceeding, as I said, at no time has this issue ever been raised that I, in any preceding meeting, said any such thing that what she's testified to today. I am asking for more than just an hour to read this transcript because I believe that there are contradictory statements that she's just made as it's so associated with the meeting time she's had and who were in those meetings and what was said in those meetings that were not reflected in her testimony today. And I am planning on going through it thoroughly because, as you said, Your Honor, not my reputation, my license are on the line, and I'm outraged at Mr. Sultan's tactics here today. I'm beyond myself. And
Okay,
I
now
need
I
time
wasn't
to
asking
get
you
beyond that.
to actually go on with the case
Communicate with my
unless you
client.
decided to. I was gonna give you an hour to talk to your client, make some assessment when I know you're upset, and I understand why you're upset. I wanted to give you some time, talk to your client, calm down a little bit, and then come back, and if you say, okay, I don't feel that it is appropriate for me to continue on, and my client is gonna need to find another attorney, that's fine. I'm complete, but I want, before that happens, I want you to have an opportunity to calmly talk to your client, and then we'll come back and see where you are. All right?
Fair enough, Your Honor.
So it's 1:26. Let's come back at 2:26, and then hopefully we will have some resolution of where we are in this matter, and then we can you can tell us what you and your client have decided is going to happen. And Mr. Sultan, I'm afraid that you are going to have to go along with whatever they decide because you brought this on without telling us, and this is not acceptable. So everybody take a break, and we'll be back in an hour.